the depth of your unraveling is often directly proportional to the power of the rebirth and the identity upgrade that's available to you on the other side. So if you're really, really in it right now, I want you to remember that you're not falling apart. You are rising into deeper alignment. It's not a failure. It's not a setback. This is actually where everything shifts. Welcome back to part 2 of a new series called The Upgrade. If you missed part 1, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that episode because we're going to build on last week's conversation really about how do you tactically upgrade your identity to match the reality, the big dream, the vision that you have for your life. Because if you want a different external reality, it starts with a change within. It starts by becoming the woman who can hold it. We're breaking down in this series exactly how to do that and giving words, putting language to a process that I would guarantee most of us have probably been through before. But just because we've been through it once doesn't mean that we always understand exactly what's happening the next time we go to enter a season of change, because change can be really, really uncomfortable. And today we're going to talk about what I think is one of the most uncomfortable phases of this process. Even the name itself is uncomfortable. When I was naming these phases, I kept trying on different words. And the one I kept coming back to is the unraveling. It's like the old you no longer fits. You've chosen the invitation to say, yes, I want to step forward into my identity upgrade. I want change. I want to become this new version. We talked about that in episode 1. But then it ushers us into this phase where there's really a death happening. It's a death of your old self. And I love this quote. I saw this on Instagram just today, and the creator that I follow, his handle is Christopher, and I think it's 2 underscores, Seiffert, Seiffert. He had this quote that just struck me because it fits within the conversation we're going to have today about what the unraveling is really doing. And he said, when you finally choose truth, everything false begins to shake. Clarity is not always comfortable because it strips the illusion bare. And most people spend their entire lives avoiding the unraveling that's necessary in order to become the version of themselves who has everything they desire. And what this looks like is they stay in relationships that feel safe, but they feel stagnant. They keep performing the identity that earns other people's approval because that feels really good. They chase the same goals even after those goals no longer have the same meaning or significance. And it's because the unraveling literally threatens everything that our ego has created in order to feel safe and create the illusion of safety. But here is the hard truth. No real transformation happens without unraveling. You actually can't create your next level life while clinging on to beliefs or patterns or personas that were built to survive your previous life. So the unraveling is kind of like this dismantling process. It's your soul saying, I'm just ready to be more honest, more real, more free. And it is where the old identity starts to fall apart. And that can feel really, really scary. It's often not very pretty. And you might feel unmotivated. You might feel kind of emotionally raw. It's a bit confusing. And again, if you're someone like me, oldest daughter, very type A, I'm even a Capricorn, you might be feeling a lot of things that are the antithesis to what you've known about yourself and what has made you successful. You might even feel guilt for wanting more. You just know that you cannot do life the way that you used to anymore. It does often feel like a breakdown, when in reality, it's a breakthrough in disguise. And the way that I always envision it is, the invitation and accepting the invitation often is kind of like, let's say you're wearing a sweater and you see a little string hanging off of the sleeve and you just start to pull that string. You're like, oh, let me just tug on this. And the more you keep pulling it, right, the more the sweater starts to unravel. And as you're pulling and as you're shedding and, as you're starting to dig into some of the layers we're going to talk about that are a part of this phase, the unraveling phase, before you know it, you are now in a crop top. The sweater is now a crop top. Maybe you keep pulling because you're really going all in on this transformation and now you're wearing sweater pasties, right? You're vulnerable. You're exposed. It doesn't feel comfortable. Some of the ways to know that you're in an unraveling process, some of the emotions you might notice that I think are really important to speak to because these are such uncomfortable emotions to be with. I want to start to give context to why this phase is necessary. But let's talk about first what you might be experiencing to know and be able to put words to what you're feeling. Because I think if not, this is the phase where often I do see so many people get stuck and lost because these are all emotions we don't really want to feel. We think something's wrong. And then a lot of times we default to old patterns that our old identity used to cling to in order to feel better and get a dopamine hit when those are the exact patterns that we're supposed to be shedding. So you might just feel kind of stuck, kind of triggered, or unexpectedly emotional. I know for me, this season, this phase is often accompanied with a feeling of restlessness. Like I'm almost just sort of like, I can't quite find comfort in the things that used to bring me comfort. I'm just restless. I don't usually feel motivated by the things that used to drive me. And that part has been very disorienting as an achiever. When I've had moments in this current season and, because unraveling is not this linear journey, a lot of times I'll kind of go into another season where I'm moving through the healing and then I'll come back to unraveling because there's more to dig and unravel and unpack. And it's brought me to these places where I'm like, gosh, am I even motivated at all anymore? And the truth is I'm just not motivated in the same way that I used to be because the motivation that used to drive me was rooted in pain. It was rooted in self-preservation. It was rooted in trying to not feel the feelings that I now allow myself to feel because that's more true to the identity of the future version of me. So if you find yourself kind of unmotivated by things that used to drive you or not wanting the same goals that you used to want, that can indicate that you're starting to be in this unraveling phase. I want to talk about the guilt part because this is so often a theme that I hear from women who are declaring that they want more. Is on the other side of that, again, what happens is we declare we want more. We don't realize that that is an invitation. We are saying, yes, I want to grow. I want to upgrade my identity to the woman who now has the more that I can feel, even if I don't know what that means. And simultaneously, what can start to happen as you surrender to this journey and you say yes, and you say, okay, I'm signing up for this, is the guilt will kick in. Guilt for wanting more, or sometimes shame for having more, shame for outgrowing people, outgrowing patterns that are very tied to previous identities. So that feeling of guilt and shame can be intense if you've never been through an unraveling process and you don't know what's happening is actually a part of the process. The other really big, really uncomfortable emotion that I did not ever realize was such a big part of stepping into the woman that I want to become is the feeling of grief and loss or even just potential loss of the familiar identities and familiar people and relationships that I know I'll have to leave behind in order to step into the next chapter. If you're feeling a lot of grief, that can often indicate that you are in an unraveling. It's not a problem. You are not broken. You are just in transition. It's actually a beautiful process. And then you can also expect that in the midst of all of that, even though you might have a day where, the grief and the feeling of loss and the sadness is just overwhelming, you'll also find these occasional sparks and this quiet knowing that something bigger is calling you. And I remember, when I think about the unraveling, I think about my entire 2024, from the moment that I realized my 13-year marriage was ending and I went through the loss of a pet, a loved one. I went through the loss of another relationship that I was ready to release and shift and change. I found myself just in the midst of all of this grief, like the deepest feeling of loss I'd ever experienced in a short period of time. And even in the midst of feeling all of that, I could feel this teeny tiny, it was like the smallest little, I almost think of like a pilot light in an oven, or there's like a pilot light it's there, it's ready to spark something bigger, a bigger flame. And yes, you need to take action in order to spark that flame, but the pilot light, that little glimmer of hope, is like the reminder that the flame is there. It's ready to be ignited when you're ready to ignite it. And if you look in the midst of an unraveling season, there is almost always these little sparks, this little quiet knowing or voice reminding you that something bigger is happening, that you are not broken. You are just in a transition right now. And the unraveling is necessary because there has to be a clearing. It's like this sacred breakdown of everything that is not coming with you, where you're going next. And we always have the choice, just like we have the choice to accept the invitation, we have the choice to cling to what is trying to unravel or to let it go. And that is so much easier said than done. But when we realize that we're in the middle of a very sacred process, that what is being cleared is clearing the way for the real becoming, and that this part is hard, but it's not permanent, I think that it allows us to surrender a little bit more deeply, even if we don't understand why certain things are being cleared, certain doors are closing, we're getting no's where we were for sure. We were so sure that something was going to be a yes. If we can step back and remember that all of this is tied to something that we declared we want, and the level of trust that we have in the process and in what is being dismantled. Sometimes it's a part of us, a habit. Someone will point out to you something that feels really uncomfortable, but you needed to see it. You needed to see that habit, that pattern, that way of being, that way of showing up in your relationships cannot come with you into the woman you're becoming, into this next phase. Then I think it helps us to put perspective to things that feel really, really challenging. Here is what you need to remember, and just what you need to support yourself in an unraveling phase. The first one, and this is often a tough one, is radical honesty. Honesty about what is working and what is not. And the more you are willing to be honest, unapologetically honest about what is not working, what you were really unhappy, what you were disappointed with, what is not working out the way that you wanted it to, the more you can start to get clarity about what needs to shift. And then radical honesty also applies to getting clear about what you really want. What do you actually want that's not filtered through anyone else's desires, anyone else's opinions? What do you actually want? If you can allow this unraveling to bring to the surface what you're unhappy, what you're disappointed, what you're just not satisfied with. Dissatisfaction can be such a catalyst. And I think, especially in the personal development world, we're kind of trained to have this lens of gratitude, which I am all about. But I think gratitude can often steal the honesty that is required to create real change. Because if I'm saying, gosh, I'm just not happy with the business that I've built, and that feels icky to even say out loud, like I'm just getting honest, like now I'm judging myself, I feel ashamed for saying that, versus just saying, I'm so grateful for what I've built. You might be equally grateful and unhappy and ready to change it. Both can coexist. But if we only cling to gratitude and we don't get radically honest about what's just not working anymore, we don't have the insight that we need in order to change. Some of the other things that I think are helpful is hopefully this conversation is just giving you some language to put into words what you're experiencing so you don't spiral into self-blame or the guilt loop for wanting more, or thinking you're a bad person for not being grateful and wanting something different. And then honestly, just a safe space to grieve. Grief is such a deep and sacred part of this process, especially if you're shedding relationships or people, or, if we think about it, any identity upgrade is always shedding a relationship because you're shedding the relationship with the person you once were. And that is not something that can happen authentically without feeling a sense of loss. So giving yourself space to grieve, even if it's grieving the things that you thought you once wanted. And then the other one is permission to not have all of the answers right now, because you're not going to, just like we talked about in phase 1, you're just still not going to have answers and you're not going to have clarity. So don't look for it. Realize that the point of the unraveling is to strip away the path that you thought you were walking down, because that's not the path for you anymore. And I think what happens is when we strip away the external certainty of the direction we were going, it forces us to tune inward, which is actually where the transformation occurs. So if you find that you're in a season of uncertainty and unraveling and you just don't know which way is up and which way is down, realize that that's all for a purpose, because it's trying to point you back to yourself. It's trying to point you to some deeper insights into the transformation that wants to occur. And then community is just always going to be a part of this. Community is essential to moving through this process in a way that doesn't have you get stuck at the points that can be really, really uncomfortable. Some supportive actions that you can take when you find yourself in the midst of an unraveling. Again, I think journaling, processing out loud, maybe for you that's talking with a friend, but if you can capture it in some way that feels authentic for you, in a way that you can read your own thoughts and have them kind of reflected back to you, either recording a video or handwriting or typing out a journal entry, say the truth that you're afraid to say out loud. Especially for the radical honesty piece, write down what you're dissatisfied with. Allow yourself to go there. Let it be okay that you can be grateful and dissatisfied and want more. The two aren't mutually exclusive. You can actually have both. And I think any person who is growing will be equally grateful and a little bit dissatisfied and wanting to change. That's what it is to be a human being who is evolving. I think it can be really beautiful in the unraveling phase to have a process of honoring your former self. This could be writing a letter or having some tangible way of honoring and thanking the version of you that got you this far. Because accepting an upgrade invitation and stepping into the unraveling isn't saying that you don't appreciate or don't have gratitude for your former self. In fact, I think if we can have gratitude for the version of us that has brought us this far, while also knowing that our whole point of existence is to keep evolving, then it leaves space for both, and we get to honor the previous versions of ourselves, which I think is part of what is required in order to really release her. That we can honor what she's built and how hard she worked, even the way she worked. That she's not wrong, we're just complete with that version of us. And I think of so many previous versions of myself that I wouldn't be the version sitting here in front of you today had it not been for that previous version. But I'm also complete with the way that that version of me operated. A third practice that is so powerful in the midst of an unraveling is to practice these moments of micro trust building. Here's what I mean by that. Because you're often stripped of clarity and certainty in the path forward, especially in an unraveling, you might find it a little bit hard to know what to do next. Because you're being asked to rely more on intuition than external certainty and an external plan. So building micro trust looks like following one teeny tiny intuitive nudge every single day. It could be the smallest thing, like drive this way to work, go here for coffee, send this email or send this text to someone you're thinking about right now. And you're going to follow that intuitive nudge without needing any proof that it's going to work out or it's going to produce some result that you're trying to get. You're just starting to listen to your intuition and hopefully in the process, turn up the volume on the way that your intuition speaks to you. So I want you to, if you are in a place that you can close your eyes, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. And I just want you to feel the words that I'm about to say. And this is kind of like an affirmation you can write down. You can maybe have this pop up as a reminder if you're in an unraveling phase. But this is the affirmation I want you to repeat to yourself daily. I am not falling apart. I am rising into deeper alignment right now. I'm not falling apart. I'm rising into deeper alignment. And if we can remember that that's the whole point of an unraveling, that unraveling is necessary. We don't get to become a new version of ourselves without an unraveling phase. That if we can remember that, it makes the discomfort that will still be a part of this phase, because anytime we're grieving a loss, we're going to feel discomfort. Anytime we want change, it's going to require some sense of loss. But the depth of your unraveling is often directly proportional to the power of the rebirth and the identity upgrade that's available to you on the other side. So if you're really, really in it right now, I want you to remember that you're not falling apart. You are rising into deeper alignment, and the depth of the discomfort, the depth of the unraveling you are currently going through is going to correlate to an equally large and equally powerful rebirth on the other side. I mean, you will quite literally become a new person in this process, but not if you get stuck in the unraveling by avoiding it, by clinging to comfort, by avoiding the changes that you are going to be directed to make. The way to move through the unraveling into the next phase that we're going to talk about in the next episode is to follow those intuitive nudges, to take the uncomfortable actions, to support yourself in the ways that we've talked about in this episode, and truly honor that this unraveling is part of the process. It's not a failure. It's not a setback. It is a sacred initiation. This is actually where everything shifts. And if we can really release it release what we're being asked to release with grace and with love and gratitude, then we can make space for what's new and what's trying to find its way into our life to come in. And that's what we're going to talk about in part 3, phase 3 of the upgrade. We're going to talk about why space is essential in this transformation process. Because just like no real transformation happens without an unraveling, no real transformation happens without clearing space for the old to leave so that the new can come in. So we're going to see you in the next episode, and we're going to go into this a lot deeper.